In the late hours of November 20th, Disney made the shocking announcement that Bob Iger would be returning to the role of Disney CEO, while Bob Chapek has been terminated effective immediate. You will note this came right after the disappointing quarterly results, and right before the mass firings Bob Chapek had alerted Disney staff were forthcoming. This is no coincidence. These mass firings were Chapek's opportunity to take Disney away from hyper-partisan wokeness and back towards political neutrality, by way of firing the uber-woke Disney staffers that turned Disney's content into ideopolitical propaganda. Now, Bob Iger, the CEO who installed and enabled these ideopolitical activists in the first place, is back. What will that mean going forward? We shall see, for in this editorial, I will begin by going through just how bad the latter years of Iger's reign were for Disney, how Chapek really hasn't done anything but deal with the time bombs left by Iger which detonated on his watch, how Iger could have returned, and what that return might mean going forward. First, as you may have noticed, this video is mayhaps not quite as visually polished as you're used to, for which I apologize. But even Tom has to sleep sometime. I have Pablo working on another video, but I want this one out fast, so I'm doing it myself, and we're going to have to deal with some suitable static imagery this time around. With that said, let's begin with Iger's legacy. Like Eisner before him, Bob Iger was a CEO that stayed on for too long. His vision and strategies were right for the company for the first half of his tenure. But in the second half, those strategies and ensuing tactics were no longer right for an ever-changing marketplace. In retrospect, Disney should have replaced Iger almost a decade ago with someone else whose visions were more aligned with the market as it was then. There is a reason why CEOs usually only last 3 to 5 years in major corporations. And part of that is that while their strategies may have been right for that time frame, the market changes, and so a change in vision is required to stay ahead of the curve. And oftentimes, the person behind the previously right vision can't come up with a new one for the changing market. Case in point, Iger's acquisition of Pixar and Marvel were arguably the best acquisitions Disney ever made, and they were made in the good half of Iger's tenure. Iger's acquisition of Lucasfilm could have been something special, but that didn't quite work out, and I'll get back to why. In the latter part of Iger's tenure, when we in retrospect can see that his strategies were out of date, Iger acquired Fox, which was the single most expensive acquisition Disney ever made, and so far, the absolute worst in the company's history. Iger did this because he needed content for his brainchild, the Netflix rival Disney+, which by the way led to Netflix immediately cancelling their Marvel shows like Daredevil, which in the process cost Disney more than $100 million in licensing revenue. Also, Iger mandated that the creatives put as much emphasis on Disney Plus as theatrical releases, which we now in retrospect know led to filler on Disney Plus and a cheapened theatrical experience, with no post-box office revenue to speak of. Because if it goes straight to Disney Plus, that means Netflix won't pay Disney hundreds of millions to have it on their platform. You see, Disney Plus maybe wasn't such a hot idea after all. The worst thing Iger did though was make Disney woke. No doubt aided by some of Disney's biggest corporate owners and investors. These would be the kind of investors I have previously alluded to that aren't looking for a direct financial return on their entertainment investments because they have an ulterior motive with them. Iger hired one woke creative and staffer after the other, gradually filling the company with people that hate the Disney legacy and that wants to utterly subvert the company's traditional values, which indeed we see in Disney's output. That's why the Lucasfilm acquisition didn't work. Rather than continue the Lucasfilm legacy, the creators decided to subvert expectations, and they did so with Iger's approval. Are you not happy with Marvel's Phase 4? Not pleased with Pixar's Lightyear or Strange World? Kathleen Kennedy's pet projects? While all of that may be released now, it was all greenlit by Bob Iger. When fans rejected creative decisions made under Iger's watch, such as with The Last Jedi, fans were labeled as toxic. This was gaslighting, because in reality, the most toxic den of vipers you can possibly find were the creatives and their staffers that Iger hired. Iger enabled his department heads, which is why Hollywood loves him, but those department heads are toxic, and so is their content, which while claiming to be inclusive, in reality is divisive and exclusionary. Alas, this was likely by the design of Iger and some of those major Disney shareholders backing him, but not all. Apart from those few but major ones, the rest of Disney's investors and shareholders actually do want to profit from Disney directly, and they were able to stage the coup which saw Iger partially dethroned and Chapek placed there in his stead. Chapek's mandate was to take Disney away from identity politics and back to politically neutral, but this was met with massive resistance and protests, both from Iger's woke staffers and from those same corporate owners that have ulterior motives with their Disney investment. Iger never formally left Disney until the end of last year, and even then there were rumors he was still active behind the scenes within the, I hate to use the term, but I can think of no more appropriate, the deep state of Disney, which is spearheaded by those very corporate owners that want Disney to be woke, which means Chapek was their enemy. Every single disaster Chapek faced was either due to a time bomb left over by Iger which detonated on Chapek's watch, or due to highly organized and orchestrated resistance against Chapek, which we saw with the previously covered uprising against him, which even led to DeSantis taking Disney on, not for anything Chapek did, but for the time bombs left over from Bob Iger. On that note, many have wondered, after the uprisings against Chapek, why didn't he just fire all the activists? Why doesn't he fire Kathleen Kennedy and Victoria Alonso and all the other toxic creators and staffers? Again, I point you to the list of top corporate owners behind Disney. This is why. Chapek simply does not have the institutional power to fire people at will, not with these investors blocking him. The only way he can fire people of any significance is by letting them fail, lose Disney money, and then argue that failing to fire them would be a dereliction of Disney's financial responsibilities to all their other owners and shareholders that actually want to profit from their Disney portfolio. From Michelle Rejwan to Peter Rice, that is the process he had to go through for every firing that has taken place. And with the poor fiscal results, mass firings were now set up. But it would appear Disney's deep state got to him first. Here, I will not pretend to know the detailed machinations of what went down, but somehow, no doubt aided by those investors who aren't looking for direct return on their entertainment assets, Iger was able to outmaneuver Chapek. We will no doubt learn more about this in the days to come, and we will be discussing this live on Monday's morning show with WDW Pro and Kamran Pasha, and you do not want to miss out on that, so click the link in the description to make sure you don't. But now that Iger is back, what will he do? My first thought is that Iger is going to double down on the wokeness and remove the Byzantine layers of administration that Chapek put in place specifically to keep Disney's toxic creatives and department heads in check. That is something Chapek was wildly criticized for by Hollywood, but it is something that would have led to less woke productions in the years to come once all of Iger's projects had been released. Which they have not yet been. Case in point, both Wakanda Forever and Strange World are Iger projects. I would expect Iger to once again unleash the toxic woke creatives and greenlight many more years worth of woke and divisive content. Kathleen Kennedy, whichever activist is running Pixar, Victoria Alonso, and you woke recruit Kevin Feige can all pop the champagne, knowing their ideological work can continue. That is, unless Iger decides he wants to clear up his legacy and actually make Disney profitable again. I don't think it's very likely that Iger would do that, but if he did, the way to do it would be by blaming Chapek for all of Iger's own time bombs going off, continue with Chapek's policies, but then steal credit for their long-term positive effect on the bottom line. Again, I don't think that is very likely, but I wouldn't put it past a man so devoid of morals and scruples as Bob Iger. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, and be sure to check back for what is going to be an epic live stream.